Welcome back to Attack of the Poison Outputs. Today we are going to be covering nodes. This is the last section of this series, and the thing is, it deals with a subject that exists outside of the blockchain. A common theme that I have been bringing up is how metadata is often correlated with the timing of transactions, and this is how people are being traced by blockchain surveillance companies. And so it's no surprise then that how a person navigates their usage on a peer-to-peer network will play a significant factor into the metadata that they leave behind. This is a complicated and nuanced subject. So to begin, we're going to take a look at a summary video I produced a while back that goes over what nodes are, and then we will further break down how they work.
Monero is maintained by a decentralized network of nodes run by users around the world. Nodes serve three essential functions: distribution of the blockchain history, verification, and cryptographic soundness, and the transmission of new peer-to-peer transactions. The Monero network would not exist today if nodes were not running. And as an incentive, managing your own node leads to the most secure and private experience that Monero users can have. A node can be run on any computer with an internet connection and enough hard drive space. When you first start a node, it synchronizes to the network, downloading a copy of the entire blockchain from other peers. Over time, the blockchain will continue to grow as more transactions are sent. If you find yourself short of hard drive space, you have the ability to trim the size of the blockchain by 2/3 through a process known as pruning. This will have no effect on your privacy or the soundness of the blockchain. It should be noted that running a node is not a requirement to use Monero. Many Monero users access nodes remotely using the official core wallet, trusted third-party wallets, or one of several mobile applications. This is because node operators have the option of allowing their downloaded blockchain to be accessed, which permits the remote user to scan the node's blockchain with their private key and thereby send private transactions from their personal device. Remotely accessing a node does not reveal the amount of XMR or the destination of XMR being sent. However, bad actors can relay inaccurate blockchain information, trick users into accepting inaccurately large transaction fees, or log IP addresses and access times of the remote user. Because of this trust involved, it is recommended that remote users familiarize themselves with onion routing and only use a node of a trusted friend for their security. And furthermore, that other more active users such as merchants operate their own node. With a node that is active, the user will have strong privacy because of Dandelion++. While you run a node, a passive observer of the network will not be able to tell whether you are sending transactions on the Monero network or relaying transactions from other nodes or remote users on the network. Therefore, with an active node, a passive observer would not be able to tell when you connect to the Monero network to scan the blockchain or send a transaction. Lastly, the Monero transaction sent locally or remotely is stealthily transferred to a neighboring node in the stem phase. The neighboring node then shares the transaction to all other nodes around it in the fluff phase. An important distinction is that the stem phase can last through several nodes, thereby obscuring when the fluff phase begins. This innovation prevents bad actors who are observing the network from discovering the origin of the original transaction. Monero nodes are a vital core concept that is the foundation for every Monero transaction. Check out getmonero.org and run your very own node today.
All right, so there's a lot of information to unpack there, and to be honest with you, I don't even know what the definition of a node even really is. It's kind of just like the Monero network. Without nodes, you wouldn't have Monero. So there are different types of nodes, and I think that's a good way to start this slideshow I'm going to show you here. And the first type of node is a remote node. This is probably the most common. And essentially what this means is you are not downloading the blockchain. You are not sharing the blockchain with anybody else. What you are doing is you are connecting to somebody who is allowing you to connect to their node, which has a blockchain. So you're like entering the network using somebody else's downloaded part of the network and then using that to send a transaction. Okay, that person cannot see what you're sending or who you're sending to. They can't see your IP address, among other things, but that is a remote user. So for example, somebody using Cake Wallet, you connect to a node to send a transaction. That is a remote node user. You then have peer-to-peer nodes, and these are the most common types of nodes. And contrary to popular belief, these nodes are not actually receiving requests from the remote node users. All a peer-to-peer node is doing is communicating with other P2P nodes. So you are essentially downloading the blockchain and then helping other people download the blockchain and verifying that everything is correct and relaying information amongst the Monero network. If you are running a full node like this, you're awesome, because without you, the Monero network wouldn't work. Okay? These people can also send their own transactions, so they don't rely on other people. Remote node users cannot just send a transaction. But if you're running your own peer-to-peer node, you can send a transaction on your own without any help. So yeah, most people are running these types of nodes. But then you have what I like to think of as a public full node. And this is a node in which you're allowing people to actually access your blockchain so that they can then use the information on your blockchain to form ring signatures to send transactions. This is totally optional. Most people don't do this, but if you do some customized settings, you can allow people to actually enter your node remotely and send transactions. So for example, Cake Wallet runs a public full node, and it's very popular, and people use that node to broadcast their transactions if they are a remote user. So there's all these different types of nodes, and there's nuances to them. And in general, this is how the Monero network runs. Now, of course, Monero exists on both the ClearNet and Tor, for example. And you can be a remote user on Tor, or you could run a full node on Tor, or you could run a completely public full node on Tor as well. Keep in mind, though, if you are just using the ClearNet, your IP address is exposed. And as we have seen from the leaked Chainalysis slides, which I'm going to be talking about in a future video, they actually saw IP addresses connecting to their malicious node, and they were harvesting that data. So when you do connect to a node, you were giving away your IP address, which is why using Tor is preferable in that situation. So yes, an exposed IP address is obviously a metadata leak, and there's other issues that come along with that as well. Oh, and one other thing to note, if you are running a node on the ClearNet, like a peer-to-peer node, your IP address is also being broadcasted. So it's not just remote users who are impacted by this. It also impacts people who are running nodes. This is not just affecting Monero. This affects literally every cryptocurrency. This is just this is how it works, right? It's a peer-to-peer network. We're gonna have these weird issues, and the other thing too is Tor and I2P. They also have issues, but generally speaking, it's much safer to use Tor than it would be to use the ClearNet, which is why I personally recommend it. And of course, there is the option of a VPN. This also works to mask your IP address, obviously. So in a pinch, you can also use a VPN. So I will be making a video about setting up a Tor node. This is a more experienced user feature. So mostly for the Linux users out there, if you're interested in a step-by-step process to do that, stay tuned because I will be helping you out. And we're going to be going into a lot more detail. However, if you are like interested in just using Tor and you don't want to like learn technical stuff, download Feather Wallet. That's the easy thing to do. Feather Wallet actually has Tor built into it. It's super easy to use. And it's the wallet I recommend to newbies for that reason. You can just download it, and now you have Tor, and you can just connect to other Tor public nodes that have the blockchain. You can connect to those nodes, and you'll be protected at least over Tor. So I would recommend just doing that. Now this brings me to Dandelion++. The most common misconception about Dandelion++ is that it like totally protects network level privacy. It does not do that at all. What it does is it prevents somebody from seeing the origin of a transaction. Now, I don't know the technical details off the top of my head, but basically without Dandelion++, you'll be able to figure out where a transaction comes from if you have a lot of nodes sniffing around, trying to find transactions. I know, terrible explanation, but that's basically how it works. It does not shield your IP address. It does not prevent people from seeing transactions being sent. What it does, though, is it prevents malicious nodes from seeing where a transaction is originating from. Okay, so yeah, this is a very common misconception. I think in the video that I showed earlier, I do a really good job of explaining how it works. So maybe rewatch that a couple times. But essentially, it obfuscates the origin of a transaction and where that transaction comes from. And lastly, yeah, there are many different types of attacks that can come with nodes. And we will be covering these in more detail in a future video. Currently, there is actually a Dandelion++ attack that is possibly happening. So I will be covering that. One thing that is an issue is if you are being a remote user, the person who's hosting the node can see when you access their node, and they can see what block height you're looking at. So they can essentially know when you're logging in. I will explain this in more detail, but just keep that in mind that they can log that type of data. And this also plays into a role with timing analysis. Also, malicious nodes, they can give out high fees just to screw with you. This high fee bug, I don't know if it's been fixed yet, but it has happened to people. So if you're just connecting to a random node, they could just give you a high fee just to troll you. And you'll lose extra Monero without realizing it, which is obviously bad. Another thing is malicious nodes can give out wrong ring signature information. We'll go into more detail on that later. An internet service provider can see when you send a transaction, and no, Dandelion++ does not prevent this. And with Tor, it's more of a timing thing. So like if your internet service provider sees you going into Tor and then going out of Tor at very specific intervals that match with transactions, that is pretty suspect to somebody investigating you. So we will go over that as well. So I'll be going into more detail of all of these attacks later on. I just wanted to have a broad summary here, though, of all the different things about nodes. So yeah, thanks for watching, and please donate.